On the track, it's speed, strategy, and survival.
This is the world of racing. But here, we're mixing horsepower with humor.
The most overrated driver of all time.
Other than our driver?
Welcome to the Racing with KLAS podcast, hosted by Aaron and NASCAR ARCA Series driver Andy J. Yes, the man who once said,
I'm just gonna put my foot on the floor and I'm not lifting till I see God or a checkered flag.
Strap in, start your engines, and let's get rolling. This is Racing with KLAS. All right, welcome to Racing with KLAS. Aaron and Andy, as always, and the man that we affectionately refer to as Uncle Kevin, one of our team owners. Kevin is with us. Not only is he sporting the 73 hoodie, but he's got the KLAS logo and everything. So if you can't tell, this man owns a race team. First of all, how do you feel about the fact that you are now a multi-year owner of a race team?
Let me ask my wife. Hold on, let me get her. So, I feel great, actually. Actually, it's a great. You would have thought in the beginning I might regret it, but when I say that, the financial costs, balanced with stress, but competing, the progress we've made, the team, the enjoyment we have, I don't regret it. I'm looking forward to more years. So very excited.
And I will say this, I've not been around this team very long, but if you're watching this podcast, maybe for the very first time, I can tell you I have worked with other teams. This is not my first race team to work with, but this is definitely the most tight-knit, family oriented group of people that I've ever been around. KLAS Motorsports, I hate calling it a team because it really is a family. And that was never more evident than this year. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about.
You got Andy, the Buffalo Mafia. I'm from Massachusetts. You got Mass Holes. I think KLAS Holes is perfect for our group. You can cut that out, but I said, what are you? I am a KLAS Hole. So, I don't know if that works, but
it'll make a good t-shirt one way or the other.
There it is. Actually, that might make a great t-shirt for sale. I didn't even think of that.
There you go.
I didn't have my marketing hat on. I had my humor hat on. So.
All right, Andy, let's go to you first. We're going to talk a little bit about 2025. If you could summarize 2025 into one word or sentence, how would you describe 2025 with KLAS Motorsports and you in the driver's seat of the 73 car?
Just so close, I run those last few laps of Talladega through my head all the time, and even Daytona, I feel like we had a pretty realistic shot there, and just so close to just nipping away at that goal, and man, even Kansas at the end of the year there, I feel like very realistic shot at a podium if the cautions fall the right way, and just we're kind of stuck on that fourth place kind of thing we got going on there. Sicewooden did it over at New Hampshire, and then Glenn did it, and then I've done it a few times now. So just dying to get to that next step so you can start chasing a new goal. But I think that if you look at it, I think we made a lot of gains on super speedway, which we already kind of started with a good super speedway program. So that's always really cool. And I feel like we made gains on the intermediate stuff. I feel like we had a really good intermediate program already. So even with our one road course race, I'd say we definitely brought a stronger car there. We equaled our best finish, at least for me, over there, but I feel like we did it in a different way this time. I think the last time we finished seventh there probably was a little bit less of a competitive seventh. Just we had that was the one with the rain and the crazy last lap, and I nipped off a few there. So I feel like when we ran Watkins Glen this time, I could see Venturini cars out of my windshield, and maybe we need to even qualifying, I think we picked up over a second. So I feel like we gained everywhere. Obviously we still got a little work to do on the short track stuff, and Bristol really didn't go our way. That's probably the one where I'd say just, we probably struggled. I don't think we, Watkins Glen, our expectations are a little bit measured. So I think we probably surpassed our expectations a little bit at Watkins Glen, and probably at Bristol, maybe, fell a little short of our expectations, So I think, those two maybe kind of cross each other off. But, I think we made a big step in the super speedway and some small steps in the intermediate stuff. And, it was a fun year, working with TJ more and more. And I feel like TJ, has more confidence in me that, he wants to work on these little things, and we're working on finite details when it comes to some of this stuff. And he's very engaged, and that's making us better too. So, just everything that you put into it, Mike and Andy in the shop, and just all the little stuff. And, we were lucky this year. We didn't get tore up too bad too many times, where we were, working on the cars, trying to make them better each time too. So, that helps without completely junking anything all year. No real engine problems or anything, but, little stuff like that where you're tinkering on making the cars faster instead of just, putting front clips on and stuff always helps too.
Kevin, I'll ask you the same question, and maybe from an owner's perspective, it's a little bit different. But if you kind of had to summarize 2025 as a season from a owner's perspective, how do you feel about the season overall?
Promising, and at the same time, I'd say progress too, because, Andy summed it up nicely. I think if you look at the super speedways, we could win at any point on those. At intermediates, we need to set a goal of podium finishes, with I'm not going to say every race, but with little luck, we, like Andy said, get from fourth to get to the podium and see what goes from there. Probably need the most work on our short track. It's probably a lot of it is the vehicle. So, the chassis itself. So we're probably going to need to do something there, which we might do over the winter. And road course, we continue to make progress, but I think that would require an investment in some of the chassis and equipment, but progress too, because, we've upgraded some of our equipment. We upgraded our hauler and the experience. We really look good, and looks are important. The image is important. Looks fabulous. The experience is fabulous. So, yeah.
I'm glad Kevin kind of touched on the trailer stuff and the team and just sort of the presentation, because that has been a pretty big jump. And, that's something not a lot of, you see Xfinity teams that don't have that attention to detail. I see a lot of trucks pulling in every week with the Xfinity stuff with the wrong stickers on and stuff. And, it's hard to find time to get to all that stuff, especially with a small team. And I think that's a testament to, everything with the people we got going on with Andy Seiss and all the little time it takes to do that stuff. Cause it's hard to look the part every week too. So that is a huge step that we made this year. And, for me, seeing my name on the side of the truck, still pretty incredible pulling into a NASCAR track. So I'll never get over that.
We didn't want to make it that big. We made the 73 bigger than the NDJ. We didn't want to,
I'm fine with that.
We'll go 6 inches a year, I think, on the.
Yeah, no, if I get a better finish or something.
And I will say, and this a little bit later on, but favorite moments of the season, I'm going to ask you guys about that here in a second. But I do have to shout out that a huge moment happened that KLAS Motorsports had 2 cars on a track that finished in the top 10 at one point this season. That is a huge kind of thing to hang your hat on as a team and as a garage.
Yeah, everything worked out great there because, Glenn, who purchased his car from the same sources and same connections that Andy did, put us together. We were able to help Glenn. He was already making an effort. Glenn has ample road experience, so the two of them getting together to test benefited both of them. And the test that we did at, where was it, Andy? Carolina? Where was it?
CMP, Carolina Motorsports Park.
Yeah. So the test that we did there combined with carrying that over, and, it just really came together for us. That was, to me, that was one of the milestones to say we ran a second car, which means remember, you're hauling 2 cars. You got 2 teams to pit, 2 teams to prepare, and to finish 4th and 7th, first time doing that was a huge milestone. And both cars were very competitive, and it was a great race.
Yeah, I mean, just a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I'll say the stretch run from Rockingham to Michigan with I believe it was 5 races, racing every other week basically. I think actually Rockingham and Talladega were back-to-back weeks. So it was we went Rockingham, Talladega, Kansas, Charlotte, Michigan, back to back to back, and we ran successfully at all of them. I don't I think we had a mechanical issue up at Michigan with the car shutting off, but even that race we were running inside the top 10 comfortably, and I believe the rest of the races were top 10s. I'd have to think about it for a second. They get jumbled as the years go on, but we ran, fit the Rockingham, we were 4th at Talladega, and just we put good runs together every week while racing every other week, and that's hard to do for a small team. And I'd say, definitely not in the Andy J days, and probably even probably the first year of the KLAS Motorsports thing. I don't know that we could have pulled that off with the resources and people that we had, but as you see, everything kind of put together, and we're built to do that now, because that's hard to get turned around and go to the next track, get turned around, go to the next track, get turned around, go to the next track. You need resources, you need time, you need preparation. And when you look at the larger Xfinity teams, the cost per race is, it's when you figure in the winnings and all that, it's somewhat similar. I think the hardest thing about racing at the higher levels is just you gotta back to back to back to back to back. And, that's where you get into these bigger teams, just have so many people and resources that they're able to do that. So for us being a little team, all hands on deck, I was in the shop staying on couches, and Mike and Andy were digging on Sundays with, everything we had to make that work for that stretch run. So was really proud of not just that we went, but that we went and we were competitive, and we weren't lacking for anything in any of those races. It's hard to do.
Kevin, if you had to point it down to what were some of your favorite moments of the season when you think back?
The whole Watkins Glen experience, which we talked about, was one. Just the event itself, the people. I'm gonna just give a real shout out to Bob Polverari, who anybody that's followed modified racing or New England knows him from the Riverside Speedway days and winning the Spring Sizzler in, was it 81, I think. And we ran the 71, which we put the third one for the 7-Eleven, and Bob was amazing. Sharp as a tack, friendly as can be, a ton of fun, wants to come back. That whole event, when the 2 cars doing so well, was just a great experience. I didn't, because of work, do all the races, and I will say that it was super enjoyable sitting with a group of folks, watching Rockingham and how competitive we were, but it was interesting. When you're not there, you're like, okay, how am I going to like this? But it was a nice experience. I mean, obviously FS1, FS2 do a great job of the coverage, and it was a good race for us, so that was fun. But I'd say Watkins Glen was the highlight. Daytona is always fun. Talladega is a blast. We have a spot on the backstretch, stay the whole weekend, so it's a party. I mean, it's there are some that just the event itself, no matter how you do, is just fantastic. Charlotte on Memorial Day, always amazing. So yeah, no, I'd say Watkins Glen, and the last Kansas race, right down to the last tire blowing. The weather was perfect. We had some sponsors there, some new ones, and it was a beautiful weekend, and we were fast in practice. Like, the minute Andy went on the track, we were number 1 on the board. We were number 1 on the practice board every car on the track for 20, 30 minutes, and then they put on some, new tires and went for a run. And, we finished up, I think we were third or fourth in practice, and little bit of a miscue on the qualifying lap, but we were still that fast and charged right to the front, and there were a couple of times on the track we were, I think, the fastest car or as fast as a leader. So that was really, regardless of the outcome, just a great way to end the season, with great sponsors. They had a blast. We went from the race to watching college football in the RV to hanging out. And so that was just a really, hanging with the race team. That was a great weekend to end, this season on. So it's not over. Andy and Andy are going to run some modified races, the Andys. So we still get to have some fun, but it was great for KLAS.
Andy J, can I do a highlight for my season?
By all means.
So, when we started doing this podcast, I really didn't have a clue. I knew Andy's sound clip. I knew enough about, racing to be dangerous, but not enough to be an expert at all. But to be able to text Andy and say, "Hey, I'm getting a hair up my butt. I'm packing up 2 guys and we're going to drive all night to Charlotte," and then to show up, and every single crew member on the team shook my hand and said how much they appreciated that I was willing to do that. And then when we got down there, the fact that we were on pit row with Cletus McFarland, and we were the only race team with a camera crew doing interviews after the race. Like, we looked the part, and it was kind of a last minute thing that we threw together. But I can remember, it was my first time watching Andy race live, which we've talked about in this podcast before. I was scared to death the entire race, because it's not this. I've been to NASCAR races. It's not the same when, like, the driver is a friend, not like just someone you work with. And, watching all of that. And then the same thing at Kansas, just seeing that from a social media perspective, from a media perspective in general, we can do stuff that looks and feels and is just as good as anything anybody else can do. And we get to have a whole lot more fun doing it. And that was, for me, a huge win this season for us.
Well, not only the addition of what you're doing, and shout out to Josh, what he has done with our videos and content and is amazing, and gotta make sure he's with us next year somehow, some way, to help, you, Aaron, with what you do. But he has done, I've looked at some of our videos and production and just was in shock. Like, I will say, actually, that's probably one of the highlights, was just, wow. I mean, what a great job. What the team has done with his guidance. It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, just echoing everything Kevin said. Having Josh on board has been really cool. I think that actually started at Charlotte. I did a podcast with him once, and we always stay friends, and he was helping Corey LaJoy, and I asked if he wanted to get involved, and he dove right in, and Andy Sice fell in love, and it's been the honeymoon ever since. So cool to have Josh. And I think I think he complements the stuff that you're doing, Aaron, and just, I think it's, with his video work, and you kind of understand the algorithms, and you got that bombastic personality, and I just think it's a really cool 1-2 punch. So grateful for both of you guys. So grateful to have both of you guys on board this year. Try not to dwell on it too much, because I'm gonna get sad because we're not going back there next year. But Charlotte was a cool weekend. I think that was, I come from modified racing where it was never a winning strategy, but we always loved to pit late with the modified. We throw the right rear on and make the charge, and it was always good for a third place finish, but it was always exciting, and I always just like being exciting. And Charlotte was a race where we ended up on an opposite pit strategy, where we had fresh tires, and I was in modified mode, and we went green, and I went outside 3 wide, just hauling ass right up against the wall, passing cars on that first lap. And I was thinking in my head, like, this is it. Like, I'm in the modified. We're gonna go run down the leaders with this fresh right rear, and we're gonna go. And we made a hell of a charge, and only ended up fifth. The charge kind of stalled out at some point. The tires evened out, but we were one spot behind the Gibbs car, and it was looking out the windshield. There was some really stout stuff out in front of us. So that was an exciting race just because it was. Sometimes with the structured pit stops and all that, everyone kind of ends up on the same deal. So just to be a little racy and see Mike making a call, Mike and Andy making calls in the pits and kind of be able to mix in a little bit of strategy and trying to do my best job behind the wheel. That was an exciting race for sure. But probably like, I don't know. I mean, so much. I mean, just leading laps at Talladega will always be the highlight. I mean, just thinking about that, just leading those laps there at the end and kind of planning for the end. And that's another one I try not to think about too much because I just just one of those deals. You just get that close, and being a race car driver with this wonderful opportunity in KLAS Motorsports and everything, it's you think about those little opportunities and you don't want to let them go. So I'm always trying to be mentally prepared and thinking about that stuff, and I do. And but getting to lead those laps at Talladega was definitely the highlight of the year, I'd have to say. So, like, Charlotte was cool. Going back to Rockingham was cool. It kind of had like a short track feel to it, and then we're kind of double header with the Busch cars, and those guys put on a hell of a show, and it was just being back there was cool. So it was a pretty cool season, just all around. It was a solid season. Like I say, we want to break through and get that win, but like I say, I'd say everywhere we went, we were solid. We were running for a top 5, with a jingle or two, fighting up a little bit further even, and got bit by the bad luck bug a couple times here and there, but just all in all, it was a fun year.
Going into the year, what were some of the challenges that you knew you were going to have this year, and how many of those challenges were you pretty happy with how the team responded to?
The biggest challenge going into the year was if we ran for the championship, which we were going to try to make a decision based on finances and position, logistically would have been hard to do. So I think next year we have to be ready almost regardless, or a little more ready. I don't know that, because when you look at parts of the schedule, when it gets into that meet, as Andy said, you get some back to back weeks. It's some of the smaller, great short tracks, and your dirt tracks and everything. That's fantastic. But I think if we had the financial means to do it, I don't know that we would have wanted to, even though we were basically, at that point after 6 races, 4th, maybe only 17 points out of 1st. I mean,
it was less than that.
Yeah, less than that. We had a great, first 6, 7 races or whatever it was. And if you take away the bad luck Andy said we had at one track with the tire, we easily could have been second or near the lead. So it was a really strong start to the season. And I think that if we were a little more, when I say ready, we're always ready, but ready for what we want to do, compete. I don't know if we could have competed at the level we wanted to. So this year, if we're serious about it, making a run, depending on how it goes, we've got to have a little more lined up, in order to do it. And when you look at this year's schedule, if you take what we normally do, we were looking at it today, you take what we normally do and put in Toledo, which is not a hard race for us to do, and we've done it before. We will go 8 races deep before, we have to think about it. So there's some, for us, next year's schedule is not that bad. It actually worked out, I think, pretty good logistically and from a, race order standpoint for us. So by simply adding, what we've done in the past, Phoenix, and then adding in Toledo, we will go 8 races deep, hopefully next year, and have more time to decide. So that was probably the biggest challenge is what do we do if we hit race 6 and we're in, first or second, and lo and behold, we get there and we're only 17 points out. I'm like, Andy and I were like,
It was less than that. I think it was only like 8 or 10.
less than that. We'd have to look, but we were,
Yeah, it was only like 8 or 10 or something. I could be wrong.
So I think that's what I talk about the cars. When you do short tracks, we've got to get another short track car, and it's got to be, and make that one our backup car. I think that's one of our moves we have to do this off season, and it wouldn't hurt to get a newer chassis, road course car. And I think we'd be in fantastic shape, and then take one of those cars that we have and make it our dirt car, so that was, honestly, second big challenge for me is I knew I wasn't going to do as many races this year because of work. We're growing our business, and I had so much on my plate that I knew it wasn't going to be feasible to hit every race that we had planned. So I did miss a few, but that's all right. But I honestly, Andy Seiss and Mike, and they do an amazing job eliminating stress when you arrive at the track, as Andy talked about earlier. I know I'm in business. I just walk through. If I was an outsider looking at that, I would look at the way the team is run and go, this is an incredibly organized, efficient team of almost all volunteers, which makes it even more amazing.
And speaking to that, it's just what we've always done. Go racing. That's what we do on weekends. It's somehow we figured out how to do it at a extremely high level, but it's coming from the Buffalo side of it, it's just what we always did. We just always went racing. So, just kind of treat it like that. Never, yeah, no, it's humbling for sure, but it's, I don't know. It's just special, but we never, I think once we get there, you take it all in, right? And you're at Daytona and Talladega and all these places, and you take it all in, and it's humbling. But I think once the door drops on the trailer and, the day starts, it's just a race. So I'm there to race. The guys are there to race. And I don't think we actually treat it a lot differently. Obviously it's on a higher level, and you got to be really on your game, and you got to be fresh, and can't be making mistakes, and you got to have a plan. And, there's a lot of little details that you got to pay attention to, because, the mistakes, matter more at a higher level the higher you go up, obviously. But, at the end of the day, we're just going racing like we always did. And it's probably true when you look at Andy, going there, and his parents go to the races, and his dad's working on the car, and, it's just what we've always done. We just go racing. And Mike Dayton, I don't know, he's like, I think he was probably a crew chief on a race car by the time he was like 5, so he's just been doing
Andy
it for
said he was born with a wrench in his hand.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
With a little mustache, probably.
Well, one of the changes we made this year in travel was switching from hotels to Airbnbs.
That's been fun.
And so we've really been able to upgrade the experience, get nice, Airbnb facilities for the whole team to stay in. And I'm going to have to stay there once on an air mattress, because I'm sure that's an experience, being there for a couple nights with the entire team, so
yeah.
And when there's a pool, I can't imagine what that looks like, and that whole event,
Oh yeah.
So
it's fun.
Yeah.
Some stories that can and some stories that cannot be told. I'm probably assuming come from that Airbnb.
Yeah, I'm waiting to be banned from Airbnb, but in all seriousness, we've treated the properties. It's anybody watching, we're fine. But no, that honestly was a nice change. Everybody's been super happy with that. So
yeah, for sure. Now we're usually, early to bed, because Andy Seiss is gonna leave us if we're not up by like 3:30 to get into the truck, because if you don't get to the credentials office 7 hours before gates open, then I don't know what happens. I think a black hole opens up into the universe and just sucks the whole race.
I do like that. I do love being an owner where because my normal job is, you wake up at 4 a.m. and can't go back to sleep worried about business. So you're up, you're working. When I go to the race team, I can look at the schedule and go, okay, garage opens at 6. They're going to be there at 6. Practice is at 11. Qualifying's at 2. And I'll just mosey on over, take the golf cart over at like 10:55, walk in like I've been there all day doing something, shake some hands, watch us. It's the team really has their act together.
In the early days of doing all this, I was pretty involved in the pit setup and everything, and getting the car lined up for tech and all that. And certainly in the original days, and then even the beginning of the KLAS days. But as we've added guys like Daniel and Dakota and all the Buffalo guys have kind of settled into roles, and they've been able to, now that everything's more structured, my duties on race day have just become, less pit related and more race car related. My last job that I was just really good at it, and I'm actually really finicky about it. I don't like it when anyone else does it. Was laser centering up the scales, because I can make them more level than I think I can make them more level than anyone on pit road. I've watched every guy do it, and I'm just like, I just got to make them perfect. Otherwise, it'll just drive me nuts. Because then that's how you set up the car as the day goes. And the series changed the rule this year where you don't have to set up the scales anymore. So that was pretty much my last like pre-race setup job that I had left. So once that got eliminated, I still have to do it for Daytona and Talladega.
Until you said that, I didn't realize. I just had the visual in my head that I remember you used to put the scales out, and then we don't. Never even thought to ask, how come we stopped doing that? Didn't even know it was a rule change.
The test at Kansas and Daytona Talladega are the only 2 times I have to do, or 3 times I got to do it now. So if I can figure out a way to not have to be on that first truck going to the racetrack, because if those who don't know me, I am what's called a night owl. I prefer to I prefer to get my things done later in the evening. Like I'm going to go to the race car shop when we hang up here. So but that does result in me tending to sleep a little bit later than most people. So I've gotten pretty good at figuring out little ways. Like I'll pick out, like, if there's a guy on the team that has a car, I'll just go up to him like, hey, how they're all leaving at like 5 in the morning, and like, yeah, you're leaving at 7, and I'm gonna ride with you, and that's okay, because that's just what's gonna happen. So it was funny, like even Bristol, everyone had to get up like crazy early, like 3:30, 4, something nuts, and I was just like not all about it. So Todd and Jody, our sponsors, they had like a little Airbnb thing across the street. So I go to Andy, I'm like, yeah, Abby's getting in at like 10. It'd be so much easier just to go get her. And, thinking maybe I'll just crash at the Airbnb, just make life easy. He's like, oh yeah, okay, I guess that makes sense. I'm like, okay. And like, I got up probably 4 hours later than everybody else. I walked over after the line was down, and I got there as they were dropping the door on the back trailer. So with 4 hours extra of sleep. So that was like, that was my crowning achievement of the sleep session kind of part of the year there. But my little game I play.
Last thing I've got before we close this episode out, which this is just something new we started, Kevin. We just call it a pit stop. It's just a topic, and we throw it in at the end, and it has created fun clips for socials. And today's topic is most influential figures in racing history. So what I'm going to do is let each of you pick one person that you think you would say is one of the most. It doesn't have to be the most influential or who you'd rank at the first, but just who you would say is one of the most influential figures in the history of racing, and whichever one of you wants to go first.
Well, man, I got 7 answers to all these questions, right?
I just need one.
Well, I'm wearing my Lancaster Championship hat from a couple weeks ago, and anytime I got an indoor championship earlier this year too, which I've never been great at winning championships because I'm kind of a hard charger. So, I'll win a few, and then I'll, wreck trying, and then I end up like, third in points or something. But whenever I got a championship battle coming up, I always stop and I always watch the or at least highlights of the 1992 Hooters 500, where Alan Kawicki, the Underbird, went in there behind a little bit, and he was in the car, calculated fuel mileage, and knew all the points, and I would say just that was the culminating factor of the Alan Kawicki story. But I just think the whole Alan Kawicki story is so cool. Where he came down south without really any prospects, and he put a team together, and he got sponsors, and he built this little team up from nothing, and eventually got good enough that he was offered the Junior Johnson 11, and he said I couldn't do it because he built this team and he couldn't abandon his guys, and turns out he has to go race that car for the championship. And just love that story, just start to finish, and he won it his way in every way that you could. The crew called him into the pits, and he stayed out for 2 extra laps, and the crew screaming on the radio. Danny Glad, actually I had a Danny Glad engine in one of my modifieds once, but Danny Glad engine builder, we don't think you're going to make it back around. But he stayed up 2 extra laps because he had the math all figured in his head on what he had to do. And he led 1 more lap than Bill Elliott and got the 5 bonus points instead of him. And he won the championship because of that. It would have swung the other way because he won it by 5 points. So it would have been flipped the other way. So, I'd say Alan Kawicki, honorable mention for, Earnhardt and obviously Ayrton Senna's a big inspiration, but we'll go with Kawicki.
Kevin, who do you got as one of your favorite, most influential figures in the history of racing?
I'd say, I'm going to just say this before I answer. There are a lot of unsung heroes, in racing that are influential in different ways. And I'll give you an example. I went to my friend Bill Sutton 60th birthday party in Massachusetts last weekend, and Bill's dad was there, 83, 84 years old, whatever he was. And we were talking, and I started going to Riverside Speedway when I was 5 years old with my neighbor, Al Stefanik. My dad didn't want to go to the races, and Al Stefanik, no relation to Mike or Bobby Stefanik, but Al Stefanik would bring us, and he was the one that hooked me on racing. But then when we moved to South Hadley, Mass, I didn't have a ride, and I met Bill in high school, and him and his dad went, so they let me, hitch a ride, and Bill and I became best friends. But if I hadn't been able to get a ride from Bill, and that turned into, for us, when we got our license at 16, we would go to every race, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, everywhere. We'd go to Oswego, we'd go. And if it wasn't for those 2 people, I wouldn't be involved with racing. And along the way, we started to give David Miller a ride to the races and working on a street stock. And David Miller is USNE Power that, does a ton for modified racing and modified drivers. So you just think about the connection of, what a couple of people can do that like racing and what that does for the future of the sport. It's amazing. But on the racing level, honestly, I'd have to say Jeff Bodine. Loved watching him and Richie Evans grow up, and that dynamic between the quote flashier, if you will, Jeff, but it was really, the Billy Taylor car probably, and the big red one, but and the Richie Evans, grind it out, build your own cars, do your own thing. But Jeff, the way he carved his way from the Northeast, through all the divisions winning, into the Cup Series winning, head to head with Dale Earnhardt, beating him often, not backing down from him, just what an incredible time it was to watch, racing back then. And then you think about the innovations he did, 3-point suspension, if I remember correctly, full-faced helmet. Then he did the bobsled team. It wasn't for him, there would have been no, as gold medal for the bobsled team, but, then chassis dynamics, or it was it Bodine, or it was chassis dynamics, and the cars he would build. And just overall, the total impact he's had on the sport and in life in general. he was a hero. And it was funny. I don't know if you know this, but I had an old Exide shirt, and that was, I think, the Kawicki car. That's funny, right? I think the
He
7
purchased the team, yeah.
Yeah, he purchased the team. So the Kawicki car, if you actually connect it to Andy's story, the Kawicki car, Jeff Bodine is running with the Exide colors. I bought the shirt when I, was a fan going to the races. I gave it to my daughter, Rachel, who loves retro stuff and loves racing now. Rachel's walking through the pavilion at Daytona, and all of a sudden this lady says, "Hey, Jeff, that's your shirt." And it was Jeff Bodine, and he started talking to Rachel, took a picture, and signed the shirt.
Wow.
Probably what, 35, 40 years later, same shirt.
Yeah.
So pretty cool. So, I'd say he is, plays a big role in my heart for racing.
No, that's a good pick, Kevin. He kind of does represent, probably, he was our strongest guy from the Northeast probably for years and years.
And your area too, at Chemung and the Speedway, and his brothers, Todd and Brett,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, he's probably, the strongest guy coming from the modifieds for years and years. Maybe, you go through all the Cup Series stuff. There hasn't been a lot of, enough, I would say, guys coming from the Northeast, the modifieds that get represented at that series. But, touching on innovation too, I believe, and, Seiss was here, he'd help me out, but I believe he was the first one to bring power steering into the Cup Series.
Power steering. I knew there was something else. It was power steering.
Yeah.
3-point suspension with, I think, the modifieds, then
Yep.
the full face helmet. And I'll tell you talk about the greatest race, and I remember that race. The most irritating race for me was when Bodine was on the pole at Indy and
Got dumped by his brother.
And got dumped by his brother, Brett. I wanted to jump through the TV, find Brett, and just pound on Brett until he couldn't breathe anymore. I mean, Jeff was fast. He had, I'm not saying, I've never met Brett, I can't speak. I'm joking here, but it was, Jeff was fast. He was on the Hoosier tires. He had a really good shot at that race. You could tell from the get-go and qualifying. And when Brett just dumped him, I just was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So,
He was at 86 Daytona 500 winner too. So,
yeah,
you can always hang your hat on that. That's, there's not
surprised he didn't win a championship. I think he, everything I've seen, he didn't win a championship because of all the times he and Earnhardt were feuding so much that any chance Jeff had would be diminished by Dale smashing him into the wall or knocking him sideways. So I think they had such a feud, it hurt,
I don't, it's weird because you think about Hendrick now and how influential they are. And, back then, the Hendrick cars would have been, I guess, Bodine for a little bit. And then you think Tim Richmond and Darrell Waltrip. And you never really, just thinking back on those years, I don't know that they were contenders often enough, probably equipment wise. And I think, but I don't know. It wasn't Hendrick Motorsports back then, but you never really heard them in the point stories with any of those cars. But
no,
I'm a big believer that Alan Kawicki kind of, with everything he did, he was just a unicorn. And, he was the owner driver that went and won the championship because he could do that. He could set the cars up. He could run the business. He showed up with his briefcase and he could go drive the race cars and he could work on the engines. He could do all this stuff. And a lot of drivers saw that and tried to say that they could do it. And I think it ruined a lot of careers. And I think Jeff's was one of them. No, it really did. Because if you look at it, so you got Darrell Waltrip owns his own team. You got Bill Elliott owns his own team. You got Jeff Bodine owns his own team. You got Ricky Rudd owns his own team. And if you look at all those drivers in the 90s, they really weren't successful. Jeff Bodine won a couple races with the 7. Waltrip never won with his own team. Ricky Rudd was probably maybe the best. He would win like once a year. But, Bill Elliott never won with his own team. But then when you saw these guys, like all of them had a resurgence at the end. So Bill Elliott goes to Evernham in the 2000s and wins some races. Rudd goes to Yates at the end and wins some races. Darrell Waltrip, even at the very end, he filled in for Steve Park in the one car and he had like a top 5 run somewhere. I don't remember exactly, but I think Jeff Bodine's probably a victim of that, where I don't think the owner-driver team was capable of doing what Alan Kulwicki did. I think Alan Kulwicki was a unicorn. But had those guys not done that, I think the whole layout of the 90s would have been different, because I think that guys like Jeff Bodine and Bill Elliott would have been perennial contenders, and maybe Darrell Waltrip, maybe Ricky Rudd too. But I think that was a big factor.
That's a great point. There was a lot of several years where drivers were owners and it wasn't as successful as it should have been. But you mentioned another thing, Jeff Bodine. I don't know that Hendrick Motorsports would be here if it wasn't for his win.
You're right. That was the first win, and you're 100% right.
And then his truck race crash at Daytona is still one of the, I cannot figure out how he walked away from that. That's an amazing video to watch, him in the hospital saying he saw his dad, and that wreck was just, oh my gosh. So,
it's unbelievable. But it's I always thought that, though, with the owner driver thing, that those guys probably would have. And Jeff won some races with that 7 car.
With whose year? Not Goodyear, though.
Early on, though. I know he won Watkins Glen with it. I know he won a few but I just think, not that they weren't successful.
He was the first one to figure out the pit cycle. That's how he won Watkins Glen, when he pitted early. He was the first one that strategically, he just was an amazing strategist and technical guy, So anyway,
he pitted before the stage break. Yeah, he pitted before the stage break.
That's what I'm saying. He was the first one to figure out.
I'm kidding. They had stage breaks and crap like that back then.
Right.
That's how he made the chase that year.
That's how he made the chase that year, the championship.
Yeah. Got all those stage points.
They're gonna move the championship to championship, I hear, in 2 years to Watkins Glen, and SVG is going to win it for the next 12 years. And, and then at some point they'll figure out that they probably need to change the format. So we'll leave that.
They're going to change the format.
I do.
They won't announce it until the season is completed, because they don't want it to diminish this year's champion. But I don't know what it'll be, but they're going to Mickey Mouse it somewhere.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to us here on YouTube, or if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple, do me a favor, drop a rating. If you could review the podcast for me, that would mean a lot to me. If we have a lot more people that watch the podcast than subscribe to the YouTube channel. So if you're watching this, just subscribe to the YouTube channel, and then as soon as we upload videos, they're right there on your front page. It just makes it easy for you. So just do that for me. And make sure you follow us on all of our socials. And we will be back next week with another episode. And I think we may have the man, the myth, the legend, Andy Seiss on next week. He seems his exact words were, "I am not ready or prepared this week," which meant to me that he wants to be ready and prepared. So God only knows what we're getting. I have no idea.
Oh, he will have a script written, detailed. He'll want it to start at 4 a.m. Like Andy said. Andy won't be able to do it, so you're going to have to work out the timing of that. You can do it at 10 p.m. or 4 a.m. They're going to be arguing between that. So,
all right. Thank you guys so much. Have a great week.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you guys.
You.